morning. So this is going to be a fantastic panel. Thank you to those of you who are here to join us. I am going to allow our speakers, I'm just going to let them share their name and their position and companies. And then we're going to jump right into the panel questions. So we'll start with Mehdi.
Hey everyone, so happy to be here. I'm Mehdi or Namazi. I'm the co-founder and the chief science officer at Qunnect here in Brooklyn, New York. We are mainly focused on developing hardware for the future quantum communication networks, especially networks that are full deployed and can be integrated into the current telecom infrastructure. This is always, like Clarice knows, the topic of quantum ethics and diversity is always one of my very favorite important topics besides just talking about my hardware. So I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Mehdi. Jane. Oh, you're muted.
I'm Jane Bambauer. I am a professor of law at the University of Arizona, but I'm also the deputy director for societal impacts for a NSF-funded engineering research center that is trying to do create similar hardware and quantum internet protocols to what Qunnect is doing, although Mehdi can explain to me how our approaches might be different later on this panel.
Thank you for that. And lastly, Andre.
Thank you. And I've spent many hours in Brooklyn with Mehdi, where he tried to explain stuff to me. He's a lot better at explaining than I'm at understanding. So I'll blame him for whatever I say today. Calling from Miami Beach, but I seem distracted. It's because the beach is right here. And been an entrepreneur in quantum for about 4 years now with One Quantum, the largest global community organization in quantum with 25 chapters and 15,000 members, and Interference Advisors, where we collect data on the ecosystem and work with investors, governments, advising them on strategy in quantum globally.
Thank you all so much for that. And for the students in the room, of course, you guys did receive the bios of these people, so it's a little bit more in depth than the statements they gave today. But we're just going to jump right into the panel. And I think I'm going to start with Mehdi here. And Mehdi, what is your favorite qubit?
That's a hard question. Yeah, like I have to go with photons because that's what we do. Like it would be very weird if I don't say photons. But honestly, yeah, I like ions quite a lot in general when it gets for the computing. I think currently out of the options out there, I would always go for the ions. Unless someone can like find a way to have free gluon particles, then definitely gluons are gonna, like if you have a charged boson particle, it's very hard to beat that.
All right. Jane, and then we'll follow up with Andre answering the same question. What's your favorite qubit if you have one?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have to, I'm sort of obligated to say photons as well, because the one thing the University of Arizona does very well is make very high quality fiber optic cables. So, and I don't know enough to go with anything other than my allegiances to the institution that pays me.
And I'll go with the ions. I've always been fascinated by topological quantum computing, these two-dimensional quasi-particles that you braid with four-dimensional world lines, whatever that is, to create a three-dimensional qubit that no matter what you do to it, you can't really change the shape or the features of it. And then you create this landscape that represents your problem to compute something. I don't know, you probably need mushrooms to understand what that means, but sorry if I'm not allowed to say that, but topological quantum computing.
Awesome, awesome responses. So our students have had a lot of background this quarter talking about their favorite qubits, but mostly they've had some in-depth discussions about quantum computing. So Andre, I want to start with you, and I just want to ask, where do you see quantum computing us from your standpoint, taking us in the next 5 to 10 years? And then everybody, Andre, you'll lead the discussion. Everybody else feel free to lead in.
Well, I was a management consultant for a dozen years or so, and management consultants, maybe Jane, like lawyers always respond by saying, kind of depends. And it depends from what point of view you're asking, right? From a scientific point of view, Mehdi will add a lot. I think we still have a ton of engineering to do. I'm also especially worried about use case discovery and underlying algorithms. I actually don't know if you see my screen if I share it, that's disabled, but I could show you a sunburst of different use cases and the underlying requirements for logical gates that you would need to deliver on these use cases. And we did that by looking at a number of different research papers. You see in the inner sunburst the different industries that might be impacted by quantum computing. On the outside, the typical use cases. Up here in the filter, some simple assumptions, and we can argue them around NISQ error, 100 qubits, quantum advantage, 1,000 qubits, and 1,000,000 qubits. And there just isn't much left over, and that has less to do with the still modest performance and power of quantum computers, and more really with the algorithms and the use cases powering this. And then as a consultant who has worked with many Fortune 500 companies, you need to implement this into your day-to-day processes, your existing technology stack. You need to train your people. So I think it's absolutely amazing what folks like Mehdi and many others are doing on the science, research, and engineering side. Progress there, I believe, will continue to surprise us. Announcements last week from IBM, for example, and announcing networked quantum computing. And I had a call with Dario Gil, the head of research at IBM, who showed this amazing animated graphic of how they will connect hundreds, if not thousands, of quantum computers in this interconnected network of quantum computers. And that's how you'll get thousands and even tens or hundreds of thousands of qubits very, very fast. Obviously, still a lot of problems to solve. So that's one perspective. Just really amazed at the scientific and engineering progress, but a lot remains to be done. Very worried about the use cases and the algorithmic progress. A lot of users that I speak to, big Fortune 500 companies, start to feel the same every now and then. It's great to experiment and do research, but the big companies that might be working on the next electric vehicle or battery or a new molecule, they need to see progress, right? These are innovation programs, and it's great to do intellectual research, but at the end of the day, it needs to show a promise for the company. And we're still not there yet. Then, of course, you have, thirdly, the investment side. And I think it's impossible to escape the news around these big fundraisers, special purpose acquisition companies, SPAC deals. Hopefully, all of you have seen this London-based short seller that harshly criticized IonQ and in a very colorful 183-page report. And this is just all very normal Wall Street, but I've always had the feeling that as soon as you open the door to outside investors and board members that might not have, the credentials that Mehdi and his colleagues have, and the engineering and science perspective, these people want milestones, and these milestones will be around revenue sooner or later. We can't escape that, and that too, we're just not there. Rigetti and IonQ both announced the results last week, and they were good results, but keep the overall size of the market in mind. Rigetti announced 2.1 million in revenue, and IonQ 1.7, I believe. So tiny companies that have these huge valuations, over $1 billion, and that's a big gap to close. Us we're heading into a recession probably, and that's worrisome as well. But I think we're a small little niche that's well-financed by governments and research institutions. That's not going away. There's a lot of cash in the ecosystem. I think we'll see a tremendous consolidation, and we've seen that with some acquisitions called Quanta buying Supertech a few days ago, and other smaller deals of which we'll see an increasing number. So I think it's exciting times. It's the usual maturity curve that you see in technology, and I think we're just starting to hit the peak of hype, and then there will be some problems and troubles, both on the business and the engineering side. But once we come out of that, the good companies, the good products, and the good people are going to re-emerge much, much stronger. And that's when we really can talk about quantum advantage, if not supremacy. And I think that's going to take 3 to 5 years for us to get there.
That's awesome. I'd love to hear from the legal side and from the science side of this. Where do we see quantum computing heading in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so I want to like echo some of what Andre said, that even at our internal conferences where it's, you know, we're among friends and we're among people who are just what's the right word, intrinsically interested in making breakthroughs in science, we do have a hard time cataloging the very practical uses that are going to come in a short enough time frame to you know, keep up with the hype that's being generated. So one thing my center has identified as a potential problem is that we want to avoid, you know, we want to keep the enthusiasm going enough to motivate people to do research, but we don't want something like a quantum winter equivalent to like an AI winter where you know, investment winds up drying up. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think there have been too many breakthroughs that are too exciting already. I am curious though, Andre, so I don't know as much about quantum computing applications as I do about sensing and networking, given what our center does. For quantum computing though, am I right that some of the like protein folding problems have been, you know, there have been demonstrations of solutions to that using quantum computers, is that right? That seems like a big one.
Absolutely, and other fields as well in logistics. D-Wave is making a big push on optimization problems with their annealing approach, which they now call quantum annealing, and trying to bury that debate if annealing is quantum or not. And we're starting to see that emerge in some very, very focused areas. Absolutely. It's not something that is really commercialized yet, and you know, at the enterprise scale, but bright lights for sure.
But there, it seems like getting from, you know, getting from bench to bedside, so to speak, with something like that is very doable, and there's all the incentive in the world to do it. So I think that's a good example of, you know, we're likely to see drug, you know, and therapeutic development come out of quantum computing, I think.
Yeah. So to add a couple of things here, I totally agree with everything Andre and Jane said. That's maybe on the hardware side, I think what I'm the most excited about for the next 5 to 10 years or so. So it's very true. Yeah. So we have a lot of hardware to do still, and a lot of algorithm developments and use case finding and stuff like this. So to me, I think the better news for the people in this room is that there's a lot to do. And I think honestly, the truth is that we still don't really understand what quantum computers are. By we, I mean like literally everyone, like the collective of humanity on this planet. We still don't get it. Like in the next 5 years, 10 years or so, most of the things we're gonna do is gonna be towards like us really understanding what powers these computers can have, especially as they move towards their maturity. I mean, it's not a simple technology. This is like literally the universe itself is a quantum computer. Eventually, when you build these things, if you ever make a perfect quantum computer, it's like you made your mini universe out of atoms. That's how the universe came to be and the foundation of everything that we have. So it's not something we have dealt with before. It's not the type of probabilities and like statistics that we are familiar with. And it's going to leave a lot of room for this generation that's coming out of the college right now and graduating to really do, like, it's actually getting the exciting word. This is the part, like, if you start a lab, like I happened to be when I did my PhD and master's, and all of them, I always was the first student of the PI. Usually the first generation of students, they're screwed, yeah, because you spend years of your life, you just put the lab together, you develop the hardware, you publish a few like mid-impact papers and stuff like this, and you graduate. And then the second generation, they get nature science and stuff like this, because the hardware is there, the technology is there, they can do a lot. I think we're getting there with the quantum computing community in general. We're getting to a point that a lot of people spend the past 20 years or so put the foundation, and the hardwares are coming out and stuff like this. but we were stuck with like 70 qubits. Now we have 74, now 76. But now it's going to get to a point that the new generation that are joining the workforce and joining the not just the workforce, but like on the research side and development side, are going to really have this opportunity to understand and leverage what the true power quantum can bring to processing.
I like that. I hope that the students today will step on our carcasses on their way to really understanding and meeting the promise.
Unfortunately, Jackson, if I could share my screen again for 10 seconds.
Yeah, give me just 1 second.
Study for the Department of Defense last year around the US quantum workforce, and we found about 2,500 people working in quantum. This is just a high-level summary, and the data is very interesting. 44% research associates, 32% of them work in quantum computing hardware, 23% in algorithms, a lot of them in software, and then you see the distribution along the other applications. Over half of them are in the Northeast, over just about half. And then where it gets most interesting, in my opinion, as you start to put these things together, 2/3 have a PhD. However, 60% only have 0 to 3 years of tenure in this field. So what this means is that there's a huge skew towards research, which is great. And this requirement of having a PhD. However, people in this field, despite what you might see on the stage at big conferences with old white people, are very, very young. And that is great, but it also means there will be a big gap in 5 to 10 years as we have a higher need, bigger demand for these kind of skills, and also bigger variety of skills. Not just PhDs, but other types of educational background, obviously the regional distribution, but also in all of these other fields. And filling that gap will just kind of always be running behind for a couple of years in the near future to fill that. And that's a huge opportunity for you and a huge challenge for the entire community.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Mehdi, I do want to go back to some of the things that you said. Well, aside from the PhD student sets up the lab and then the next student gets that made me, as the person setting up the lab right now, it made me a little sad, but I mean, it's good to know that the next generations will be made better from these contributions today. So thank you for that. But you did say that it's very different from what we're used to seeing, which kind of leads me into another question, and this was logged for Jane, but all of you can answer, but what are some questions we should be asking when we are considering these new quantum technologies? What are some things that everybody's very hype about right now, but they're not really looking at some of these little details that we should be focusing on as we move forward? Yeah, well, so I think we're still a little early for the detailed answer to a question, but I mean, as part of my role in the Center for Quantum Networks, I've tried to catalog the likely first generation of applications that people might actually see as consumers, and what types of benefits and challenges and legal headaches are likely to emerge. Actually, I'll try sharing my screen too, if you don't mind, because I have a little list. But what I was projecting here more than the 5 to 10 years we've been talking about. So this is, I'm trying to extrapolate from what we know right now to imagine something where we have quantum sensors, like not only quantum computers connected to each other, but quantum sensors also connected so that the data is high quality too. And so among the things that get complicated, if we really realize much of the potential, are the things on this list here. And so let me go through it if you don't mind. I'll give just a flavor of each one. So national security or law enforcement, quantum technology actually has kind of, it pushes in two directions at once. So on one hand,
if a government has access to a powerful enough quantum computer, then they can run Shor's algorithm and break public key encryption. And so, in theory, maybe even data is being collected right now for analysis later, something like that. That's one reason that quantum networking that's one of the reasons that quantum networking, but also just post-quantum encryption more generally is very important right now, is to kind of bring back the communications security and privacy that might be broken with quantum computing. On the other hand, if we imagine a little further out, when part of your ISP kind of contract includes access to quantum-based security, then we have kind of the opposite problem, where even legitimate uses of like wiretaps or this picks up some of the encryption debates. Like even legitimate reasons to intercept a communications becomes much more costly and difficult, and maybe in some contexts impossible. And so it just kind of exacerbates the debates that are already happening with end-to-end encryption right now. Same with privacy. So a lot of quantum sensors, a lot of what people are very excited about are biomedical applications. So you could have something that's like a CAT scan or MRI that's like wearable because it's so low power. It gets such detailed information with such a low amount of power that there's no longer a danger or size constraint. And so, if we think it's hard figuring out how to regulate data in the context of like your wearable Fitbit right now, imagine the type of health information that might be collected with these types of new applications. We here at our center, actually, I'll just talk about the next one and then I'll stop and let others comment. But we're also worried about the access gaps or gaps in ultimate treatment of this technology. So we're still I'd say befuddled with why, despite the fact that the government has sunk a lot of money into broadband deployment, we still have these big persistent access gaps. And so are we going to, quantum routers are going to be much more expensive. And so for a while, they're probably going to be much more concentrated. So how do we prepare for some of those access gaps? So I think I'll stop there unless there's anything on this list that people want to hear me talk about. Let me stop sharing. There we go.
Mehdi or Andre?
Maybe jump in quickly. Yeah, I love this list. That list is these are the important things, especially to look into and talk about and really consider. Because like I always use this as an example, because what Jane said is true. Shor algorithm is very often used as an example of the impact and the consequence quantum computers can have. But I don't think that many people really notice that this is a 1994, if I'm not wrong, algorithm. It's almost, we're entering like 30 years since it's been there. It's the first thing that came up. It's a very powerful use of quantum computers for very specific reasons. But in the future, when you have these computers, when it's widely used, you should expect many algorithms similar to Shor. So sure, we should know like about the cybersecurity, but like all the aspects of our life, for good or bad, is going to be very affected by these quantum computers, the same way that the normal internet and the normal digital computers change everything for us. And usually these things happens quite rapidly. When people figure it out, they're going to figure it out and they're going to push forward very fast, the same way as digital computers. So it's really good to start having like a real understanding of the depths of the technological realm we're entering, literally, and like the doors that we're opening. Because if the first thing you see out of the door was the Shor's algorithm, believe me, like when you're like a few miles in, you're gonna see a lot of crazy stuff coming out of this technology.
One other, sorry, I forgot one of my favorite examples though of something that, which I think is a little more optimistic, is how to regulate something that winds up, if we wind up having the advantages that we think we're going to have. So to give a specific example of drug development, since that's come up in Andre's slides and since we mentioned it a little bit, right now the FDA has this very grueling pre-clearance process where we enroll people into clinical trials. We kind of assume that, you know, they are all of the clinical trials data subjects are kind of representative of the population as a whole. And none of that makes a lot of sense if we can actually achieve the kind of customizable drug development that we think might be enabled. And so, you know, what does that mean? So first of all, maybe it means that a drug developer can prove through simulations or something, if that winds up being even safer and, you know, a better, higher quality measure of efficacy than clinical trials, that would be amazing. It would be a win, you know, it would be a win across the board. But on the other hand, I mean, you can just, you know, regulators. So another thing we're trying to prepare for, I guess, is a graceful transition even for regulators to embrace what's useful about these technologies without, you know, letting too many unanticipated risks seep through too.
Those are each phenomenal answers. Jane, I kind of want to backtrack a little bit to when we were talking about access and equity of access. So I think that leads right into this question, which is how important is it to have diverse voices and backgrounds in the quantum sciences? And how do we ensure that we are creating a level playing field as we move forward?
Yeah, well, so I think it's extremely important to have diverse researchers, professionals, and, you know, a workforce in general prepared for the next kind of, you know, the evolving emerging technologies here. And I think that for a few reasons. One is fairness reasons, that we should make sure that there is adequate representation for, you know, that's an end in itself. But also, you know, we just need, this is a problem where we need all hands on board anyways. And so we need people with different backgrounds who tend to bring different types of creative solutions to this field. And so, you know, it doesn't always mean that, you know, for every problem you need like a perfectly representational board of stakeholders deciding what we should do. Sometimes that winds up kind of having, you know, I would never want to prioritize appearances over what actually is going to get the biggest bang for the buck in terms of the benefits and reducing gaps, and, you know, but it should be something that is consciously part of any responsible program for training or even developing these new technologies for training, you know, for training the next generation of workforce and for developing the new technologies.
Would anyone else like to add how we would create a level playing field in the quantum sciences?
Well, I'll share another tidbit of data on my screen here. And oops, there you go. Can you see the slide?
No.
Not yet.
No. Oof. Hold on one
Unless
second.
it's a dark page, then we can see it.
No, I'll just read the slide to you, and this is 1.5 years old. But we did an analysis of 636 companies that work in quantum, big companies, small startups, and found 782 founders, CEOs, or other senior executives at these companies. 716 of them were men, 66 were women, 600 were white, 115 Asian, 12 African American, 11 Hispanic, 44 of other ethnicity. And you saw also in my workforce slide the universities, and you know, that's just a little more over a dozen And that's not how innovation is best done, in my opinion, or any kind of research that you read on that topic. So something we need to change, and a lot of companies out there actually are very involved in community building and mentoring and outreach. So I think overall we're doing a good job, but we need to do much better just by providing opportunities to learn, to network, to get mentoring and first careers in this. And I find through our One Quantum community where we work with people like that, many are just afraid. If you're not from New York or the University of I don't know what, maybe you're a little too scared to call up somebody at IBM or at Rigetti or Claricia and say, hey, can you help me? Can you take 50 minutes of your time to advise me? People struggle with that. So we just need to give them the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I've been trying to use the fact that almost nobody totally understands why, like, we have these models of how quantum mechanics work, but no one understands why they are, they work the way that they do. And so there's some, I've been hoping that we can disarm some of that fear factor by inviting students, like at least when I talk to high school students, I encourage them to see quantum as an area that where if they start getting interested right now, they are getting in on the ground floor. There's, it's not like there's decades of infrastructure and research that they have to catch up with. But also, that's another reason though that I think figuring out what types of applications are going to be exciting can help with this recruiting process, because telling people, hey, quantum networks is great, we're going to have really good cybersecurity, like their eyes glaze over, that's not going to do it. But something related to health, or even just, I don't know, maybe like, what's a quantum video game going to look like? That's, we need something that can really excite the imagination. So that's all the more reason to get a handle on what types of applications are going to be possible.
Yeah, it's funny that you say about health. I used to work for the Women in Engineering department, and one of the things we would notice is that women tend to migrate more towards anything that has a life-based approach. So they'll do engineering, but they will do bioengineering. They will do anything. So we had to come up with an aerospace academy because the aerospace industry said, hey, we're not getting enough women. How do we do this? And most people equate industry, aerospace with defense with the loss of life as opposed to the improvement of life. And so they had to come in and kind of talk about cybersecurity and kind of demystify what the actual aerospace industry was so that it would be more interesting to the young women who may be electrical engineers or aerospace engineers, mechanical engineers, so on and so forth. So I think you really hit it on the head, because quantum is really a demystification process, right? Even the people who know quantum, such as myself, I don't like to talk about it, because then I have to kind of explain these things that are taking place that almost make little to no sense sometimes. And you can ask Clarice, she had me do a talk on quantum mechanics for our very first lecture. And I was like, do I really want to do that? Do I really want to display how much about quantum we're still struggling to understand, but explain to you why it's cool and the cool things about it? So demystification is a huge part of bringing in more people to the sciences, because when I tell people I do quantum biology, their eyes, they're like, profound. And then that's the full extent of the interaction there. So I think it's very important that on a much greater level, we do make this attractive to, I think, younger kids and just bolster the pipeline. Mehdi, did you have something you wanted to share with us?
Sure. It was a little bit before about like the importance of diversity. I mean, I know like obviously there are like infinite different reasons for it, but there is like one angle that is usually my favorite angle to look at it, or at least to me, it's a very important angle when it gets to the quantum technology world. And it's not something that's talked to, so I just wanted to mention it. Is the pure like statistical pool reason for it. The thing is that the very unique things that we deal with in this universe and this life, like including the life itself, that like we only found it on this planet out of like hundreds of billions of other options out there. They only happened because there was this huge statistical pool. The universe had like 13 billion years to try on so many planets, and eventually happened once. Or someone like Einstein, yeah, he did a lot of stuff, but we only had like a few of these people we can count throughout like the history, that like one person came and like really thought about like how, like if sun disappears, what's going to happen to the space-time around it, these things. And it's like quantum is in that stage. There are a lot of like questions we have with quantum computing. I mean, again, Shor's algorithm is 1994, Grover's is like around the same time. We're really trying so hard to find applications. And the best, most straight, like logical way is to have a big statistical pool. Because like, what if that one genius person for our generation is like someone like, I don't know, like in mid-Africa or South America or like East Asia, somewhere that they don't have access to these technologies, to anything, or to the education systems, or to the companies to come here. Or like with the minorities, when it gets to the females, way very easier. Obviously, like half the population, like there are 8 billion people. If you put like 4 billion aside, the chances of like finding that one person who could find that one breakthrough, all we need is just one transistor for quantum that can be scalable and like easily go around. So when you deal with such challenges, that sometimes having the collective mind is important, but like you do need breakthroughs for these technologies to go forward. It makes a lot of sense for governments, for industries, for investors, for everyone to push to involve everyone as much as possible. So statistically, someone come up with a solution. So that's the issue. Like when the diversity is low, even I'm hurt as a white man in the industry. Everyone is hurt because like you're literally losing people that could solve your problem that you're dealing with like throughout your like decades of research and development.
And hand in hand with that, for me, I would love to see more people and institutions that think big. I mean, it is super important to increase performance of our electrical batteries, or find a better way to do drug discovery, all these things that we all know quantum works on. But I've really never seen anyone serious saying, I'm going to use quantum computing to fix the climate crisis, or to cure cancer. And there are people working on it. It's not that those people don't exist. But where are those challenges? Where is an X Prize about, you know, eradicating cancer with quantum computing, or financial independence for all these 8 billion humans that Mehdi just mentioned, and crazy things. If you believe in quantum, then you also believe in things like time travel and others, right? Theoretically, that is possible, and there are people working on that. And now we're talking about the distant future, but where are those big ideas, and where are people that encourage those?
That's a great.
And that's the thing about time travel. Yeah, it's not distant future or past. It's time. It's anytime.
It's anytime.
Are you from the future?
It doesn't matter when you invent it.
But I'd say in general, though, those big questions get people, you know, they spark the imagination, and that's how to get people, not just young people, but, you know, people from demographics that aren't typically naturally drawn to engineering to want to be part of this field. I love, Jackson, your anecdote about how the aerospace industry does sell itself to women by citing cybersecurity, because even if cybersecurity isn't that inherently interesting to women, it's better than weapons. So yeah.
Yeah.
So like, you know, just bumping it up a level
to be fair, they did have them go through like password a cybersecurity activity. So it wasn't just like do cybersecurity. They came in with a nice hands-on activity that really got the wheels turning. But
that's good.
I mean, I think the same thing has to be said. I'd love to have a quantum, you know, technical academy where you talk a little bit about what these things actually are. So the next question is going to be two-part in the essence of time. It'll be our last moderated question before we jump to audience questions. So we're going to try to keep these short and concise. But the part A is, what is a little known fact about the quantum industry that students should know? And then follow that with one piece of advice you would give to any student who may be interested in the quantum sciences. And I'm going to ask Mehdi to lead us off here.
Sure. In the quantum tech community, we have a lot of like dirty little secrets that we keep it to ourselves. But like maybe one of them, because this is like your favorite Cupid thingy, and by now hopefully everyone who is following this course knows this, so hopefully it's not a secret to the people that are here. All qubits are basically the same. Yeah, all of them, they have their good thing. All of them, they have their bad thing. So like, it's a very, like, I usually use this when I'm talking to anyone from a new company or like anyone we want to work with, that like, if you want to get a job, like in the interview, honestly, just ask them like, what do you think is the best approach if they're building a quantum computer or something? Ask the person who's hiring you. If they're very persistently, if they're like an ion company and persistently say it's ions and nothing else, or superconducting and nothing else, it's maybe not a company you want to be in, because they probably have a lot of tunnel visions, and they're like, because all of them do something. Yeah, ion is like good at like connectivity, but has very like crappy, like hard time like increasing the number of qubits. The natural atoms, you could put as many as you want on a chip, but your connectivity sucks. Photons, everything the same. So at the end of the day, honestly, at this stage that we are, they're all very, very similar in the terms of like everything comes, all of them comes with cons and pros, and it's like a little bit of the quantum nature that like coherence is a little bit like contracting with connectivity, because the more connectivity you have, the worse you have coherence. So it's not something easy to solve either. But it's a very easy way of like realizing like who you want to work for, or like which company is actually more open to knowing that maybe their approach is not the best approach, or which researchers, and those are usually the people more fun. I think the more general thing to know about this, and like my piece of advice, is that if you're here and you're really taking this path seriously, it's really a path worth pursuing as science and technology. We should understand and really have to acknowledge that at the end of the day, quantum communication and computation is a very high risk field. There's still this real possibility that we never get those capabilities that we're expecting. It never grows that much. As I was just saying, there might be a point that the nature, the physics says that, nope, that's the best you can do. It doesn't matter how much you develop your engineering, you're gonna be stuck with this level of performances. So it's possible that it fails, but it's a very good thing to fail at, you know, because if we succeed, we're talking about technologies that are going to change like the way everyone lives for generations after we're going to be long gone like from this earth, but like for generations and generations, people are going to succeed. And honestly, like someone like me and everyone on this panel and in this room, I failed in so many things in my life. So I'm at least happy that if I fail in quantum, it's a good thing to fail in. Yeah. So don't be afraid that this is high risk. Don't be afraid that it's still a lot to know and it's not clear where it goes. Just try it. At least if you fail, you can always say, I failed in this hardest technical challenge of our time. So no one would blame you.
Well, I'll go next. I want to add I love the kind of, disclosure that these, these applications that we're trying to achieve might not happen. They might not be possible, but I think there's I would be very surprised if we don't, even if our goal winds up being closed off, if we don't wind up having discoveries that are very useful for other unexpected purposes along the way. That's just kind of how science tends to work. And from my perspective, I'm usually talking to law students or other professional students, and so my advice is a little different, but kind of along the lines of the diversifying the field thing, I tell law students that, they'll have an advantage with a tech company if they know just like anything at all about what's going on in the development of quantum information science and quantum technology. And so, so I encourage them to buy a kind of like, quantum mechanics for artists, or sort of, undergrad level book, if they're interested in going in the tech field, just so that if it comes up there, they know something about why it's interesting and possibly game-changing.
Yeah, a little secret in the industry is that nobody has really figured it out, and I mean that positively and constructively, but across the entire bandwidth of it. You go visit Mehdi in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. There's a whiteboard with different problems that his team is trying to solve. Each of them is just a monumental feat of basic research and engineering, right? And they do amazing work, but there's a lot to be done. You see these big announcements about companies raising hundreds of millions and fancy websites and Forbes and whatever. They have no clue how to sell and market any of this, or Jane, how to make a good quantum game, right? On the entire bandwidth of skills and capabilities that's needed to bring quantum into reality, from inventing it to building it to commercializing it and so forth. Nobody has figured it out. And I'll just repeat what Mehdi said. So, try, ask people. If you think you have a skill, you're really good at figuring out problems or doing marketing videos or at networking, talk to these companies. Everybody needs help, no matter how big and fancy and successful they might seem. And a sentence that Mehdi needs to put on his website, at least you'll be able to say you failed in quantum. I mean, what's better than that? So, go for it.
Thank you all so much for these fantastic points of discussion. I think I'm going to put that on a sticker and put it on my laptop, Mehdi. At least I failed at quantum. Like, of all things to fail at, I think quantum is a great thing to fail at. So I think we're going to make stickers, definitely. So at this time, this ends the moderated portion of the panel. I would like to open it up to the general audience, but I'm going to start first with student questions. So if there are any students who are in the room who would like to ask our wonderful panelists some questions, please go ahead and unmute yourself and join in on the conversation. Our students tend to be shy sometimes. And it could be anything about the industry. We have people from law industry. I mean, these people know what they're talking about. They are trustworthy sources. So, so please take this time and ask your questions, please. All right. We'll give them
See a written one though, on a comments.
From Kaylee. Yes.
Kaylee, okay, thank you, Kaylee. So what educational experiences do you feel would best prepare students for a career in quantum? Oh, great question, Kaylee.
I'll jump on that. And remember this pie chart that I showed with the vast majority of people having a PhD, very few a master's and a bachelor. We need all of it. There's no right answer to your question, and there's no prerequisite to the level and type of education that you need. I mean, I wish I took a few certificates in quantum. I wish I would have enough brain power to have a PhD, just because I find it intellectually so amazing. But to work on it, you just need that curiosity and the will to network, contact people, and find your way to fix a solution. Everything else is hard work, as always in life, but there's no pre-required degree.
Yeah, an experience that might be useful, though not required, would be something though where you're working on a project across disciplines, because this is I mean, it's a useful skill to have anyways, to be able to problem solve with people who have a different skill set from your own. But I think for the foreseeable future, the number of people who are trained specifically in quantum information science or quantum, in a specific quantum field, is going to be smaller than the number of people who will need to to get a certificate and come in and work on this. And so it's likely to be a pretty diverse team. So speaking across disciplines is going to be very useful.
Yeah, and if I add one thing, it's true, but they're saying, yeah, like it's a little bit hard to say educational experiences, because we usually have openings for literally all the positions, from engineering, software, to business, to marketing and everything, even in the smaller scales. But like, honestly, personally, what I look the most in an interview that I want to know about the person is that not only that, like, not that necessarily they're very good at one thing, but that they're like graduating from undergrad or anything, but just two factors really matters to me and to our team. How able you are, because no matter what background you're coming, there are a lot that you need to learn, because the field is, as Jane and Andrea said, it's a very interdisciplinary field, so you can't just know one thing. And how eager you are actually to learn a lot, because you come here and you learn, like, there's no need for certificates. There is nothing, like, just have some basic, like, experience like undergrad in any engineering school and stuff like this. And any company like ours, we have enough people here who can teach you a lot and like train you very well. But you do have to have the personality that you're like joining a company that not just to work, it's like you're learning how to do research, you're learning how to do development in a very like interdisciplinary way. So it's basically you're getting a master's degree, but from like a company.
Thank you for that. Are there any other students in the room who have questions for our panelists? So we do have one question in the chat, I think that may just lead us out of here, but it comes from Vincent Plaza, who says, do you consider quantum computation a disruptive, empowering innovation, sustaining innovation, or something else, or not at the level of innovation at all, and why?
I'll jump on it again because I know you have to beep me out. It just irritates me so much, but we have this spooky, amazing, weird technology, and we're trying to fit it into this small box of what JP Morgan or FedEx or Pfizer Pharmaceuticals might be able to do with it, rather than really think about what it means for a changing world and a paradigm shift in technology and how we as humans evolve. And that is probably due because we don't know what we don't know. So, we can't think outside those boxes that we put quantum in. But for me, it has to be disruptive. When I see people that are trying to build desktop quantum computers and other things, I'm sure there's a use for it, but that's an F on the assignment in my book. I think we really need to think about the future of humanity when we talk about quantum.
Yeah, I think at least my hope is that it's disruptive, that, I mean, especially when, Google and Microsoft make their quantum computers available for others, anyone to work with and program, we should see a proliferation of algorithms applied to all sorts of different problems. And so that will be disruptive for a lot of the same reasons that the classical internet was disruptive. And at least if quantum computing really does have an advantage or is meaningfully different and more powerful. So I'm hoping that it's disruptive, because I think we can channel that disruption to solve problems that are too hard right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I really don't know personally. Like, I'm not good with these words because it's not my background. I usually use disruptive anytime I'm pitching or something, if I want someone like to invest in us. But honestly, like, my hope is that these technologies become something that a few generations after, two, 3 generations after us, people will be like, how did people like us even survive? How did we live back in the days without quantum computers? Like, what they were like using Zoom to like talk to each other. What is that? So I really hope the changes so much that the same way that when we look at like, how did people like in 1970s or so, like, what was the life before cell phone and everything like that? I'm guessing that it still falls under the disruptive category, but hopefully life-changing.
I do worry a little bit, though, about the pace of change. We can handle technology shocks. We've done it before. We'll do it again. But we do seem to be on this, if quantum computing changes society as much as the classical internet, for example, it's coming just on the heels of us not even really getting to the point of adjusting to that shock. So another thing another reason I think to ask the big philosophical questions is because we really might be in a time at a precipice where it's where handling challenge, we have to figure out how to handle challenges faster, bigger challenges faster. So that's exciting.
It's all very exciting. And again, I want to thank each of you for being here today, giving your time to the Fiat Lux program. I think it's just such an awesome opportunity that our students had the opportunity to hear you speak, to hear you answer these questions. I have changed my view so I can only see myself, but I would like everybody to give the speakers a round of applause, or a Zoom round of applause, if you will, for being with us and joining us today. Panelists, thank you so much for your time, for your contributions, for such great insight. I know I will be seeing some of you quite soon, very soon. And as long as I'm with Clarice, I will see you more often than you might care to see me, but that's okay. We're going to keep having these fun quantum discussions. I want to thank everybody again for joining us. And Clarice, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we left today?
Thank you to everyone. Thanks to our panelists, our students. We are super excited to have brought this Fiat Lux, my favorite qubit series, right? This will be uploaded in our YouTube channel. Thanks, Jane, Mazi, Andre, and it's a super, super pleasure. And I hope that we continue talking about quantum and the implications of quantum for society. And thanks, Jackson. You did a terrific, terrific job. Thank you so much.
Thank you all again, and you all
Thank
have
you
wonderful
all.
days. Thank you so
Have a
much.
good day, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a great Monday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.